Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to View with Mike G, the show of life, the show of mezcal, the show of guitar playing, classic rock, having red hair, and so much more. It's great to be back recording new episodes. You know, I'm even adding a little bit of effects on these Zoom calls, so it sounds a little more intimate. Today is a great reintroduction for the show as I chat with Red Parker of Buho Mezcal, one of the co-founders there. We talk about music, we talk about mezcal, we talk about community. And just a few weeks ago now, we had an amazing Texas launch of Buho, a virtual one, sipping through some delicious mezcal from Matatlán. So we are going to dive into the life of Red and this amazing mezcal project. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this chat with Red Parker. Studios, is that right?
Redford Reed Studios, yeah.
So, because we're going to go back to St. Louis, we're going to talk about all the things, your family and everything. But this penchant for music, when did it start? Did you come from a musical family?
No, not my immediate family, but my father's side, according to my mom and the stories I know and the ones I've met, they like to sit around and play instruments and sing songs and do that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But no history of professional musicians within the family.
So is this to say, I never met my father? I hear stories about him. Are we in the same boat there?
Oh, no. I know my father.
Okay.
Yeah. So that known quantity, but I never met my dad had a guitar, and that's how it started. I found it in his closet when I was 12 or something. And it didn't have any strings on it. But my dad played tennis, and he had a bunch of tennis racket string, for these rackets. So I clipped a bunch of it and made like the same gauge and, like strung this like monster guitar.
What?
And was just like trying to make sounds come out of it. I had no concept of what I was doing. I just knew what it looked like. So I kind of built it, rigged it the same. Yeah. And then I realized I'm like, I need a little bit more than this. So I had a friend at school that was in the music band, and I was like, hey, Peter, can you show me how to play the guitar, man? He's like, yeah. And so I started going to his house, and he gave me some, lessons, and the concept of tuning the guitar just blew my mind at that time. I was like, tune it? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's not ready? No. And I'm like, you have to do this every time? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And it just became this dynamic fascination with, I think probably it began with, the instrumentation and making something, because I really like to produce things. And then it became much more about, oh, look what all these people do with these instruments. And I got into music from that angle. And then at some point, you mentioned the studio, like I moved to New York City, started a band, and then we were rehearsing in the studio. And one day the landlord came by and was going to shut the studio down because he was angry with the guy running it. And I said, oh, well, Phil, this guy, Roy, that you're talking about, he left, he sold the studio to this other guy, Ethan, he's long gone. And he's like, I'm going to shut this place down. I can't handle this. And I said, well, you don't have to shut it down. I'll take it over. And he said, okay. He said, he's like, you a citizen? I was like, yeah. He's like, you have an ID and all that stuff? I'm like, yeah. And then come to my office this weekend and we'll do the paperwork. So that weekend I went and inherited a studio.
Man.
Like overnight.
That's crazy. And, so for guitar, I feel the same way about guitar. I don't know why it was so fascinating to me, but there was a single band that really made me understand how to play guitar.
And I think we're about the same age. I'm 40, going to be 41 here shortly. I think you're 40.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 1980.
So, 80s babies, the best. You know, we are the best because we knew how to write a letter and to write an email, so we got both sides covered. But Nirvana for me, Nevermind for me, because I was 11 when it came out, and you started playing 12, roughly the same age.
Same time. That was
blew my mind. So was there a moment musically or a band or a record that you're like, okay, I really want to get into guitar?
Not until I heard maybe Band of Gypsies.
Oh, okay.
And I heard Hendrix, playing in this non-pop, style.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, that's a different way of playing guitar, Prior to that, when I first started, Nirvana was big, Stone Temple Pilots, and that kind of grunge movement drew me in. Plush was the first riff that I learned. And
nice.
This guy that taught me, Peter DePasco, he was a classic rock guy. So he taught me Zeppelin riffs, Edgar Winter Band, and all this type of kind of classic guitar stuff. And so I went down that path and thought that the solo on Heartbreaker 2, the Live and Love and Made, and that thing was just that blew my mind.
Was there being in St. Louis? So first I want to talk about the academic stuff, because I know that music will always follow you. But in terms of school, were you into other things like math and science and geography?
I was into all of that stuff. I'd say that, I'm very curious about all topics. And I went to a school that offered Russian language.
Wow.
And so when they told me they're like, okay, you have this language requirement, Now, it was seventh grade when we started. And all my friends went to Spanish, and I went to Russian language with 10 kids in the class. And I got into that. I failed the first semester, just got an F. I had no idea what it was. But then it became more of this challenge, could I comprehend this stuff?
Yeah.
And one of the blessings in disguise was that the class was so small, 10 people, that we got a lot of attention. And so within the next semester, I had worked my way up to a B grade, and then went through and learned Russian. It actually went on in college and did that as a major.
Oh, really? Where'd you go to college? Were you in Missouri?
No, I went to school at Cornell University in Ithaca. And that's how I met Jared Appel from Hotel School, who connected me ultimately with TJ Steele to do El Buho.
Did you wrap your degree at Cornell in Russian?
No, in Russian and applied economics.
Wow. So the economics side. So this is what I was going to ask you about it originally, but you as an entrepreneur, because of a couple of the articles I read about when Buho started in 2012, is that right? Or is it 2014?
Yeah, well, it's tough to say, because I'm going to give you three qualifiers. TJ was down there in 2007 and had that's when it hatched.
Yeah.
2010 was when we got money inside the company from other people and kind of put it all in motion. And then 2012, we made our first legal sale.
Okay, that's what I thought. It's been around then. But
it was
in this article, we know these journeys, right? They started years before, especially when it comes to mezcal. But they called you the money guy. And having the economics degree, does that make you the money guy?
That definitely made me the money guy. But more so than that, I was doing an investment job. And we were really a hedge fund and private equity fund, but a small shop. There were 6 of us. 2 guys owned it, and I was one of the 4 that worked with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that as a day job, from my, call it 9 to 5. And then spent all my free time trying to do music projects.
So were you running the studio while you were moonlighting?
I was moonlighting big time. And then I inherited this studio, and that was part of the DNA that I had to get involved, in the project. I was a trusted friend of Jared, and TJ and him were very tight. I knew TJ and we were friends, but we weren't, ready to do business just on our own.
Yeah.
We needed that middle link to push us together. And I had the experience of pushing paper, just filing the articles of registration, all that crap, and documenting it, So along with that, I think money follows that organization. Mm-hmm. But when we started, TJ brought, half the money to the table through his network because he had a lot of confidence in him. And I brought another half of the money. And we basically called all of our friends. At the time, we were 30-ish years old, mm-hmm. right? 10 years ago. Like, all right, we're going to start this mezcal company. Do you want to be a part of it? And by the way, don't ever expect to see the money again, but expect to have a lot of fun doing this, mm-hmm. and being part of something, So instead of putting 10 grand in the stock market, which they probably should have done, who knows?
Yeah.
Put it in our company and be part of it. And so all right, and they backed us, and that's when we bought our first stainless steel tank.
Yeah.
That was kind of block number one, get the bottles.
Yeah, and I learned, and we'll talk about what is ultimately a Texas launch here in a moment, because we had such a great time with you and Cabo. But I do wonder, because I wrestle with this still, because I have a distillery, I've got a day job, I'm still trying to write music, not necessarily make it. But I did hear, I was reading, was there a moment where music became kind of out of the picture? There's a car crash that was mentioned.
Yes.
That have an effect?
That's it's huge effect, and did a very inopportune time.
Can you tell me what happened?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you. So I was in. It was 2012. We made our first sale in the state of New York in April 1.
Yeah.
And then on May 31st, going into June 1, that night is right around 11 p.m. A friend of mine, Tash Neal, and I, we were going home from the studio, and we were just leaving Manhattan, going to Brooklyn, down Broadway. I'm sorry, we were coming down Bleecker. We were coming down Bleecker into the Broadway intersection, if you know it. And a couple guys were drag racing down Broadway, ran a red light, and ended up T-boning the cab we were in.
Jesus.
So myself, Tash, and the cab driver no one remembers anything from it, right? And then, we had a neck surgery for the cab driver. My buddy Tash had the cranioplasty, that take a piece of his skull out and put it back in.
Yeah.
And then I had just broken all my ribs, punctured my lung. So we were on the hospital I was there for about, 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
And that was at the peak too of when the band I was with, the Disco Monkeys, we had just started getting some traction. We had a Vans tour date lined up, and, just starting to crack up through the surface. And then boom, it just incapacitated me. And I'd say that if anyone suffered a concussion, they'll hopefully relate, but it took me a solid 6 months, maybe 12 months to get over the concussion.
Yeah.
Just functioning.
Are some of that I have not had a concussion, although maybe a minor one, as my mom, the nurse, said I got hit with the rock or whatever. But this is a different deal. But was that kind of era, was it cloudy? Was it sad? Was it just difficult to understand where to go next?
Yeah, it was puberty all over again, is the way I describe it. But it actually, in the context of El Buho, was a very monumental moment, because again, it was 2012. We had just kind of cranked the production, cycle, right? We'd like made a lot, bottled it and exported it, and we were selling it, and they were bottling and, doing the next one. Right. Mm-hmm. But, I didn't go down for 6 months to Mexico because I was just incapacitated. And I largely become the face for the company with the family. Mm-hmm. I was spending the most time down there, living at their distillery. And so we built a little bit of a relationship, but I didn't speak zero Zapoteco, right? So that's out. And then very little Spanish. Anyways, I get in the cab accident and I'm going back down, and I brought a bandmate of mine that's Colombian. So he spoke perfect Spanish. I'm like, you have to come with me because I can't overload myself with translating and communicating. It's too difficult. So he came down, and we go to Matatlán, sit down, and I'm clearly banged up still. And Alejandro, the guy that came with me, is like, hey man, they just asked me if it'd be okay if they performed some rituals on you that they do for their family, but they just want to warn you that it's not anything like you're used to. Mm-hmm. So they don't want you to freak out. And I was like, okay, that'd be great. So the family took me through this series of rituals that they passed down, and essentially it's a cleansing, purpose to take the bad energy from these events and rid your body of it. And they personified it at one point with an egg, that I had in my hand, and you have to throw the egg, over a wall or far away. In our case, we had a wall, things like this. But it was a very endearing moment when our business relationship pretty much faded. It was gone. That wall had dropped.
Yeah.
And there was a bigger message that they were really trying to communicate.
That's some of the critiques about the world of mezcal is that it's so transactional, and perhaps there's not really things like that going on. And we'll talk about the future of mezcal too, but did you feel relatively cleansed? Did you feel new?
I felt incredibly loved, and, it was very much my speed, just the way I'm oriented and how I believe the healing process. I'm more of a 360, anything could work. Right. So I was all open to it. And, I guess that I was very grateful that someone thought about this for me, because I wasn't thinking about it at all.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, you traveled down here. Part of the ritual involved, I had to go to bed at 8 p.m. The sun had went down and I was in bed.
Yeah.
And they're all out having dinner, and I can hear them, and I'm going, this kind of sucks. But they're like, you need to rest and chill out. And so it's just a lot of gratitude, all good feelings. And it definitely, I can tell you that from that moment forward, I've had, an open and full faith in the family.
Well, to be loved, to be accepted, that's one of the things that I don't think people realize about going to Oaxaca. And even the more remote, in my opinion, the more remote places you go, you are treated with such hospitably. You're treated with such respect, so much concern for your well-being. And it's something that people really get wrong about Mexican culture in the States. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things. Could this camaraderie of a society, of a community happen, you think, as well as it can with agave?
I'm grateful it did. I can't answer that really. I'm sorry. Then possibly, who knows?
It is possible, and I try not to speak in absolutes, but there is a love and concern that is the undercurrents of agave that I have never seen in any other category. It's not tequila, not scotch. There's cool stuff. Don't get me wrong, but it's something special here. And as everybody says, as you talked about, Steve, before we start recording, mezcal finds you. Yeah. And we've talked about you spending time with the family, the conception of El Buho. But for you, do you recall the first time you had mezcal?
Oh, I do. Because it was only, I was in college with my roommate and his girlfriend. The three of us went out and bought the bottle with the worm in it.
Ah, very good.
And so, but we didn't really realize it was mezcal. We just thought it was tequila with the worm, right? And I was, 20 years old or something. And I discovered that when I was 30, and TJ was teaching me about mezcal. So I didn't know much about mezcal. I'd been to Mexico a number of times and seen the big tequila bars with 200 brands of tequilas. And like, wow, there's so much to this. And so I started venturing out and then had to Siete Leguas, and I tried some, the major brands, the Jose Cuervo Familia and all this stuff. And then the Clase Azul. And then TJ brings me mezcal because he just found these flavors in 2007. He'd been drinking mezcal slowly in 2009. That's when we first started talking about the project. And it wasn't really until 2011 when TJ and I went down to Oaxaca. We went to Pitiona, and this who now works with us, Lorena Tiranebada, was our server that night, and she blew our minds with these mezcales, from all over the place. And that was the first true mezcal moment I had when I fell down the rabbit hole. And it's, been kind of lights out ever since. I at that point in time, I think I was drinking, a little bit of whiskey, probably a little bit more gin, some tequila. And, now I've got a pretty heavy mezcal diet, mezcal and Mexican rums at this point.
Oh yeah. That's really brilliant. Charanda is a cool category, but here's something. I don't think it's any mistake that the person that orchestrates a big band is called a maestro. And I don't think it's a mistake that mezcaleras are called maestra.
Yeah.
So you as a musical person, because the only way I can articulate tasting notes is if I talk about music, honestly, or colors, but that's all based on a triad. How do you feel about music and that creative component and mezcal? Do you feel they're very, very related?
Yes, I think they're very much related, especially as I think about the variety of mezcaleros I've seen. I'm going to say that we're kind of confined to the scale, right? Like we've agreed on the classical temperament and stuff like this. So
that is a really, really good point. And I never think about that. We're in A minor, guys. So you gotta work in A minor, right?
Well, there's 12 steps or, however many, I don't even know, but the 7 whole notes in the major scale or something. But you go to Indian music and they got the pentatonic. And I think you find both those things in mezcal and everything else in between. So it reminds me of this wide swath of technique and artistry. And I've met mezcaleros that are more formulaic, and appear to take notes and then I've met other mezcaleros that are more of that, this kind of rolled down the hill and it looked like it was ready. So I made it and I cooked it for 2 weeks just because, I don't know, I kind of forgot about it. And, just kind of off the whim, both delicious mezcals, and there's that, like I said, the maestros, that they're conducting the orchestra, and
yeah. Well, there's, when you think of structure, maybe you think of like Yngwie Malmsteen or John Petrucci, these like super technical guitar players. But then when you think about just feeling it, Elliott Smith just feels all of it, and I love that there are both of those kinds of approaches to mezcal. And I do want to ask you, so when it comes to Buho, which to me, again, feels like I use Tom Petty a little bit, but this is Hall & Oates for me.
Okay.
Because it's accessible, but still kind of interesting. You know what I mean? Because Hall & Oates, they wrote some damn fine harmonies and chord progression stuff. But for you, if you could use a band to talk about Buho, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but is there one that comes to mind, do you think?
Well, let's see here. The P-Funk just hit me in the head, but that might have just been because the mezcal just hit and I got the pepper at the end, spice to it. Let me come back to that. No one hit me right off the head,
I just feel like you think you use the word accessible, and I think these are all pop hits. You know what I mean? I don't know that they go too dark or too sad, and they're maybe leaning on the happy side, but these are all really interesting things, elements to a mezcal. And so, because I'm drinking the Tepestate now, which is, the old one. that plant's seen some shit,
Yeah, that's what actually I started thinking about, was which band could actually transition from so many different genres.
Oh.
And then like Steely Dan popped into my head, is these guys that but they're too studio driven.
Right.
And the Jimenez Mendez family they have a really overwhelming grasp of fundamentals. Mm-hmm. They do them well, and they know how to bend them a little bit. So I meant to think about that just more from the genre standpoint, because I think the Tepestate and then the Arauqueños and these different things they do, and the Capone, which I think you're drinking now, that's something that Octavio has loved, and I think, in my opinion, is his favorite mezcal. He won't ever tell you he has a favorite. He's just like, this one's my favorite, Yeah. But he loves this Capone, and he calls it Organico. Nice. I don't know why, but he does. and that's a totally different, hit.
It is. It's crazy, and so I'm so pleased with how, I don't think anyone's probably uttered these words together, but I'm pleased with quarantine because it's allowed people to unite over education, unite about their passions, because virtual things remove all barriers to communicate. And I think we could call it the official Texas launch, I guess. Last week, we had Gabriel doing tastings, and you were present as well. And I got to tell you, the people of Texas, which I do not represent them on the whole, I'm just kind of a spokesman here, but they fucking love this stuff. They love Buho, man.
They were great, and they know their mezcals. They were an impressive group, really pointed questions. And it was really interesting in that discussion, and in thinking about today, just preparation. I want to make a comment about, how it all unfolded, because I think the group was asking a little bit about, how we batch and the sizes, and, it's confusing when you see it, especially, and we have need to articulate some of the fabric that weaves the, numbers together. And I was thinking back to when we started, and I came from this background, having this music studio, and also having an investment, mindset. And TJ was coming from the chef world. And so he was like, we got to put it in stainless steel. That's what I want to do. The glass is great, but it's porous. And so there's stuff that happens. And I said, all right, well, we found the glass company, Pavisa, right? And they said, here's the glass, you can get this shape, right? It's like, sweet, we love this shape. It looks like a giant flask, really cool. It can work with the owl and this. So, and then they said minimum orders, 10,000.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, why don't you make it 13,000 bottles and we're going to buy 10,000 liters of mezcal. So that's how we started. That was the mindset. And at this point, I didn't have the understanding at all that type of container was ridiculous. But the family told me they were loving it because they're like, we want to, we'll sell you 10,000 liters. Yeah, you betcha. No problem, sir. Sign the paper. And so then we went to get stainless steel tanks. And that's when the guy's like, no, 10,000 can't do it. 5,000 I can do. And then we did the 5,000. And then we'd done one turn of 10,000 liters, right? And it took whatever it was, like 2 years or something just to deplete it. And the whole turn was real slow. And then Elsa came back, the matriarch, and she's like, we're going to do 5,000 liters because that's the size of the tank. And that's why I will do it that way. But if you get tanks, and again, get them smaller. So then we went down the thing and tried to get the 200 liter, 500 liter, and it was inordinately expensive and difficult for these guys. They didn't really want to make a tank that size. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up with 1,000 liters and 2,000 liters.
So the Espadine, good.
Oh yeah. And I was going to say, at this point, we keep going back and, in town talking to our source. And that's one of our kind of brainstorm things is like, do we want the tank stainless steel? Do we want more glass? Which way do we want to go now? And it's a topic of discussion.
Well, the brand seems to keep evolving. We have a sample of the previous Espadine, which is in the clear bottle, but now you've got this nice painted black kind of finish on it, which is just really lovely. But where'd you guys arrive on that decision aesthetically?
So the original product was the clear glass, and the design was done by Thomas Hooper, and he did it using digital, art. So he mirrored the image, and it had this really nice symmetry, and it was the Espadine product. And then we said, hey, we want to bring in the quiche and the Tobolas and all this other mezcal the family's making, but this is like, more expensive juice. It's more handmade, it's not to say more handmade, but we wanted to show it was more handmade. So we decided we'd ask Thomas Hooper to draw the owl by hand.
Oh.
So then he just did a hand drawing on the black bottle. And the way we ended up with the black glass was simply by telling the Pavisa, like, hey, we want to do a higher end product, and we're going to have this similar shape owl. And then they're like, oh, well, why don't you just use the same bottle and maybe we'll do it in a different glass?
Yeah.
Red, black. And so we went through, we got some shiny black bottles. Something that's neat that TJ has at Claro, the restaurant, is a couple of the prototype bottles, where they sent us like a neon green, shiny black. They sent us a black owl and a black bottle. We've done a lot of iterations, and much like the story about, the containers and kind of the batch size, I think it was Leslie that hit the nail on the head. Like, you make the most of what you have to work with, mm-hmm. and then you evolve from there. And that's something that really, I think, is neat about mezcal, given the size, is that brands can be nimble.
Yeah.
We're not diverting 2 million liters of whiskey in barrels from 3 years down to 1 year, all this stuff.
Do you, one of the, to that point, sorry, well, this is good because when I release this, no one's gonna be able to see what I'm doing. So I can catch flies and that'll be, because they love mezcal. You notice that? Because the sweetness of it, I could have whiskey out here. They probably wouldn't even touch it. But so, go ahead.
I want to just talk about that for a moment. I went to Norway and found a bottle of Del Maguey in a Mexican restaurant. and ended up with a fruit fly somehow. And like it just blew my mind. The fruit fly is fine, mezcal. I appreciate the observation.
That might be the only instance in which mezcal does not find you. The fruit flies. Fly mezcal. But one of the things is that we sipped through 4 of the marks, incredible diversity, but still up to line drive, really tight flavors and things. But obviously this category is growing. I think the number of marks, and maybe Gabo said this, but I've looked at the TTP and stuff. So we're talking well over 300 marks of mezcal now.
Yeah,
and it's growing year to year, which I'm not sure I have a problem with. But do you see any stress? Do you see any pressure as this category keeps growing?
That is the short answer is yes. I can see pressures. I can see relief as well. Yep. And there are a number of different things we could talk about within this context, because we're touching on sustainability.
In a sense, sure. I mean, there's also marketing irresponsibility too, and transparency, but
and
big
yes,
question.
Something I've thought a lot about personally is just trying to fast forward some of the CRM, implications. I guess I'm not even sure what year it was, 2016 or 17 when we did the new gnome, did the artisanal ancestral stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so now we're a few years into that, and it's very few marks that I've seen that have ancestral. That much I know. Mm-hmm. Looks like most are artisanals, and so as we've gone through that process, I think that we've also seen a rise in destilados in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
And that's great too. And so in the context of pressures, I largely think the pressure is on the Mexican government to figure out what they want from this in some ways. I mean, the CRM is this quasi-government, quasi-private entity. Mm-hmm. They have an example with the CRT, and you can case study that. But I'm still fascinated that of the 32 states, it seems like pretty much all of them make distillates, and now we started with this mezcal denomination, and it keeps growing in size. Mm-hmm. I see.
Good.
From that standpoint, I think that's one of the releases and relieves pressure. That if the world decides that they need to drink more mezcal, that's fine. There's, I think, plenty of capacity to do it if we start utilizing, places other than Matatlán, Mihuatlan, and the, Santa Catarina, and all these, hotbeds.
Yeah.
For production.
Durango's right for the business, as I hear. A lot of, and it's a different style and a different kind of thing. But I want to, one of the things I think is kind of interesting is, so we did this batch pick with Neta, and we're talking about doing some stuff with y'all for Texas. So we have these kind of cool one-off things, because that's like those live bootleg recordings. You know what I mean? And
I know exactly what it is. I've got, if it's the plastic bottle, we're ahead of the game.
You got it. But one of the things that was interesting is the first, which I will still say is monumental for Texas and Gabe and fans of mezcal. But we did a Neta pick, and that sold out within a couple of days, which is crazy. But nowhere on the bottle does it say mezcal. However, the way in which people were talking about it was mezcal. So for you, how do you feel about, because you're out there selling and you guys are expanding all the time, of course, just recently into Texas, but consumers, do you feel like they're pretty bright, that they want to know, they want to bring mezcal into their life?
That's generally.
And shoot me straight, Yeah,
no, generally speaking, it's kind of a loaded question. So I'm going to bifurcate it. Like most of the events I go to, it definitely feels that way. It's overwhelming, the curiosity and engagement that I get from people, right? But this is, they know I'm a mezcal guy, or I'm on the Zoom with you. And it's, we just did a charity thing where, we did a Zoom session with people that, we'd never met them before. They're not industry people. And they were much more like, when they kind of crack the first bottle and smell it, and they're, oh, that's like, wow, holy cow, what is this, rocket fuel?
Yeah.
These are people that don't drink spirits that often. So I think that the average customer right now, in say a liquor store, I think it is aware of mezcal, but not necessarily certain that they want to investigate it just yet.
Right.
And I've done a lot of in-store tastings, and the same thing, like in certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn, it seems like everyone wants to know about it. And other stores, some in Manhattan, people aren't even remotely curious as to what it is.
Yeah, we use that word hotbed, right? Matatlán is a hotbed. Mm-hmm. Austin's a hotbed.
Austin's a hotbed. Big time.
And Texas is assuredly becoming a larger hotbed. So I just I'm very optimistic that this thing will grow, and that they'll ask the questions, because all of a sudden they'll have that curiosity, But I've got a couple other questions for you, which I think it's interesting, and I know you have amazing allegiance to the family, and these marks are all very interesting and different. That ensemble, for instance, it's got a totally different texture. It's crazy that the blending of Karwinski and Americana is just really genius. I don't think this is the business model for y'all, but is there ever a consideration to work with other families or work outside of Oaxaca? Have you guys thought about that?
Yes, we've had that discussion a number of times, since we started. I think general feeling that the family and the El Buho team and owners and all of us feel is nothing seems to be broken, so let's not fix anything.
Yeah.
And so what we have done, a little bit is branch out into doing, more agaves and trying to get to this maybe new evolution of El Buho in the future. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about doing smaller batch runs. We love to do that, and we're trying to find a manufacturer that can work with us. Our current manufacturing partner is built for volume, so getting a 400 bottle run is not happening.
Yeah.
So does that give you?
Yeah, I mean, that gives me a good sense of it. If it's broke, don't fix it. I get that for sure.
We talked about it, and we got really lucky. If to reiterate the story, I think you are aware, but so we start out with Elsa and Octavio. I remember having this kind of crisis of conscious moment, because I was down there when we got all the glass delivered, all like 13,000 bottles showed up to this Oaxacan palenque, and like we couldn't even, sit in the salon anymore. It was like filled with boxes, and they just took over their house. Mm-hmm. And so we had some success, and then we ended up building a bodega, a warehouse to kind of store all this stuff, And the way we got over that was a leap of faith, and moment again of trust was we fronted them the money for another chunk of production, and they, built it up and did it on their own. So we got to kind of bankroll it for them. But then they built a second palenque, at their youngest son's house. And then they built a third one at their daughter's house. And then we just completed the fourth one at the oldest son's. It's not his house, but it's his facility.
Yeah.
So the first, dedicated mezcal fabrica versus the live work situation. And I think it was largely done, because the business has established itself. So we have confidence that, all right, this makes sense. And so we contemplated working with other families, and we inherited them. And there's a gentleman at the glass company, Pavisa, and he's told me over the years, he said, it's really simple. You just need more kids in the family.
Yeah.
That's how you keep this up. So, and we'll see what happens. But if we do work with another family or producer, it will be an organic happening. It's not something we're searching for.
Yeah.
But we're open to the idea. And if the family brings it to us, then we'll truly consider it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, again, it's the trust, the allegiance that you've built. And so we got 2 questions left for you. The next, when we had this tasting, Gabo had mentioned there's some kind of interesting ensembles, because what's available is not always the same. Coyote, for instance, it's not really all that available all the time. But what's next for Buho? I know that you just beginning to dip your feet in the water for launching the brand, Texas being a massive market, but is there another market or new bottles that are coming out?
Well, the new market is definitely Texas. I'd say that our focus will just be going deeper, in terms of relationships, and we will do our best to navigate and support, the industry as a whole, in the near term, meaning just 2021. So we're just going to focus on taking care of, where we are, and Texas is our new entrance. So we'll build there. In terms of the ensembles, we don't have anything that's necessarily lined up to bring in, but the family has a few different ensembles. One of them is a 5 agave banger, but we have to get it lab tested. I think it's Javalí, Espadín, Tepestate, Eroqueño, and Quiche. And
that's it. That's the Sgt. Pepper's of ensembles.
And that's what's really neat when you visit, the Tequila Sac Distillery, is that, given the 4 palenques now and just one family unit, when you go to Elsa's tasting room, she sometimes has, 14, 22. It's not quite Lalo crazy, but it's pretty deep. I do know that we have some Tovala that we're going to come out with that will be more of a pure line Tovala. We have a Tovala Espadín blend, but this won't be just a pure Tovala that we come out with. And behind the Javalí we have out now is our second turn on Javalí. We have a third turn coming out.
Oh, wow.
We have a Sierra Negra that we're optimistic, will pass the test, and we'll get that into marketplace. We do have a Mexicano that's lab approved. So we just are waiting on glassware for that one to bottle and then send up. That one's just resting in the tank right now.
Wow.
And then, like I said, the ensembles, there's a good chunk of them. Elsa in particular usually has anywhere from 3 to 4 ensembles. So I just came back with a Quiche Barril. Then I came back with a Quiche Eroqueño, which was like vanilla birthday cake or something.
Oh, wow.
It disappeared really quick. And then I had a Javalí, Tepestate, and Coyote.
Wow.
Which was just a bizarre group. And I do want to say that, like, we'll go down to Oaxaca to visit the family, TJ and I, over the years, and we just be, they'd say, oh, what kind of mezcals, are you guys drinking, or what are you thinking about? And we'll just start throwing out anything we'd tried, like, oh, well, we really like these Eroqueños, and we think the Sierra Negra was pretty good. And then 2 years later, you go back and they're like, hey, we got some Sierra Negra for you. And you're like,
oh, wow.
You're like, you do? And they're like, yeah, you told us a couple of years ago you wanted it. And you kind of scratch your head and you're like, yeah. And then you're like, this is delicious. This is like, so there's a lot of that ebb and flow where we'll kind of plant seeds. And then when someone comes by, one of, their network of megueros, they'll, pick up some of these other varietals and we get a chance to bring them in. And there's this, we have another product that has been a very challenging thing just because we're dealing with logistics. We've been waiting for Pavisa to make us the bottles for a long time, but we have an añejo mezcal. And we don't necessarily aspire to make añejos, but this one was a 6-year aged añejo that Octavio had. The dad had it. We never knew he had it. And one day he just says, "Hey, taste this añejo." Oh, this is delicious. Tastes like a cognac almost. And then he's like, "Yeah, do you want to buy some?" And we were like, no, like this barrel, we're not going to buy your only barrel, man. Like we don't want to do that. We're good friends and you love it. Keep it. And he's like, no, I've got 10 barrels. And we're like, oh, okay. And so then, and then Elsa kind of looked at us. She's like, yeah, you should buy it, And so we bought this añejo, and that will be, it's just more of a fun project that Octavio had. Yeah. And it's small. This one's going to be really small batch for us, well under 1,000 liters, but it's for someone that, is not necessarily an agave purist, right? But you just want to kind of have this, what would you call it? Novelty mezcal.
Yeah, I think, the ability for dipping into new states, dipping into new barrel resting. It's an untapped horizon and a frontier rather for mezcal. So I got one question left for you, and I'm gonna go back to music, of course, right?
Yes.
So I'm moving on. I'm almost doing a flight as we're talking, Red. This is great. I have these bottles all within reach, which that's a hell of a privilege, I'll tell you that. But so I'm drinking the Ensemble now, which again is really nice blend of Americano and Carbonation. But let's say you're sipping this mezcal with any musician, living or deceased, in any place that you want to, who might you want to sit down and have a drink with?
Frank Zappa.
Oh, yes.
Frank Zappa.
It's brilliant. Yeah, that's a good one. And Tomas Estes from Tequila Ocho. I think everybody's.
Yeah. I'm like, I thought he was like a Frank Zappa type. I'm like, no, I don't know that artist.
He regaled me of a tale of doing drugs while seeing Frank Zappa in the 70s in Amsterdam or something.
Wow.
And so I'm just like, this is all coming together, Red. This is all coming together. Man, I really want to thank you, one, for taking the time out, but helping people feel together, helping people feel united when we are divided in so many other ways. But one state, one nation under agave, I don't think that's so bad. And we really enjoyed Buho stuff and you and Cabo. So I can't wait to see what you're up to next, but it's really been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking that time out.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mike. Hopefully we can, make one of those pizza tapes over a bottle of Ensemble, with some noisemakers around. And I don't know if you're aware, but Don Isak was also a musician as well as a mezcalero.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so in many ways he was, doubly doomed at the time, in the culture. But thanks again for everything you're doing, and to everyone listening.
Of course, man. We need to hear these tales, and I'm really committed to making sure we can connect even further, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to have to keep drinking in front of a camera, Red. I'm getting used to it, though. I'll tell you that much.
Little by little.
So there we have it. Red Parker, one of the co-founders of El Buho Mezcal. I'm going to tell you this. I know much of the mezcal we drink from Oaxaca comes out of Santiago Matatlán, and I'm not always really excited about it, but some of the stuff they're doing at Buho it's really interesting. It's quite good, and I do respect the watering down with spring water rather than using colas and the kind of tight profile of these mezcales. I think it's really good, and it's great to talk about music with Red. It's a great team over there, and I really appreciate the dedication to the family. And so again, amazing chatting with him, but I also want to thank everybody for staying tuned in. This has been a tough time for everybody, and I absolutely understand loss. I understand not having things be the way that you want them to be, but I'm going to try to keep bringing these voices into the mix with the podcast. Reach out on Instagram, reach out on Facebook, all of this stuff. I'm here for y'all, and I know you're here for me too. There's a great community. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter how many songs you're recording for your upcoming record, and 20 is probably too many, or how much sotol you're cooking in a water immersion system in the kitchen right now, please keep dancing.